You're listening to WeDeepen Media.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Deepen with Christina. I'm your host, Christina Weber, founder and CEO of WeDeepen, Feminine Weapon, and also a certified professional coach and matchmaker. If you haven't lately, go to WeDeepen.com and check out the calendar of all types of upcoming social and transformational experiences. It's been fascinating to see the expansion of the types of experiences we're offering, from what people would call play parties all the way to experiences that are injecting love into politics, maybe infusing, injecting. Sometimes I say penetrating love into politics. We should do all of the above because politics could use all the types of love. So check out those experiences. And when I say, the play parties and the central adult retreats, our educational curriculum completely, for the most part, like the type of sex ed that we get in primary educational curriculums is so limited. And so for us to be grown-ups and go on an exploration of your sexuality seems pretty reasonable to do, whether you're partnered or you're currently single, to experience and to try new things and see what modalities, or even if it's it's a little voyeurism of being like, hey, I'm going to be in this space and I'm going to learn and gather the information. So those, when I say, they're very, I just met somebody from London this week and she's like, yeah, I think our play parties, there's not much consciousness in the play parties in London. What we're promoting through WeDeepen are definitely experiences that are educational by nature and also experiential, but you can decide what level that you wish to engage in any moment. And then the political realm, I'm nearly recently 40. It's time. Like if you are in that age bracket, even 20s to some extent, 20s, 30s, 40s, like this is our world to design. And we could see where maybe, I don't want to say our parents necessarily went wrong, but where they didn't know. I can't blame the educational curriculum for not including coursework on relationships because they didn't know. And now that we do know, and we have these spaces, why not take that information and penetrate it into the leadership of our world? If you do enjoy this podcast, please do give it 5 stars, send it to a friend, leave a comment, a review. It helps more people find it, helps me to continue to produce it. Also at WeDeepen.com, we have a new course, Relationship Renegades. Rachel Book-Smith and Emilio, who have been on this podcast, Deepen with Christina, before, they have one of those relationships that is just, it's like a relationship that many people are like, I don't know if that's even possible to have, because they're stars and they had such a strong belief of what is possible for connection and love and union this lifetime. And they've taken all of that information, all the communication skills, conflict resolution, how they set up their relationship, and they've placed it into a curriculum, a course, and they're certifying you in higher love. So check that out, Relationship Renegades, at WeDeepen.com. Today, I am sitting in a beautiful, serene backyard outside, about 45 minutes outside of Austin, Texas, with one of my dear friends, advisors, investors, Aspen. And her and I have been in a training all weekend with Aboutly. I've mentioned Aboutly on this podcast before. I can't wait to tell you, I introduce you even more deeply to Aboutly in a future podcast episode. But we did a training, and it's around how we can better understand each other based upon how our brains perceive reality. it's, you know, in each of our brains, there's like a neural network system, and we receive information, we take information in, and then it goes through all these nodes and receptors and neurons, and then we output information. And through this training, we began to unpack how each person is uniquely designed to receive the information and process the information and then export it out. And so it's through understanding this type of, I guess I'll call it a new modality, I'm able to better understand myself and the people that I'm engaging with. Aboutly was first created for work dynamics, and now is, you know, we're in research and development for how it can help people in romantic relationships, even from a potentially in a matchmaking component. So Aspen and I have been in training all weekend and been in mastermind, and I, you know, just moments ago was like, hey, do you want to record a podcast with me and tell our story and how we came together? And a little bit of that story is, you know, are the crux of that story, where it began is WeDeepen in 2019. We launched January of 2020. I raised the first round of funding from somebody outside of my family, and she is that person. And she invested in January of 2020 in an in-person events company. And 3 months later, a pandemic happened, a global pandemic happened where we couldn't gather in person. And it's been quite the journey for me to want to secure somebody's investment, secure somebody's belief in me, and stay on the path, but also being in the state of like, what the fuck is happening in the world right now? Like, I don't even know what I'm doing, but don't you worry. Everything is fine. And I don't know what I'm doing, and everything is fine. Aspen, this is your second time on Deepen with Christina. It was so beautiful to have you share that episode with Charles Eisenstein, episode 61 on exploring belonging and scarcity. So this is your second time on the podcast, and now the first time that I'm hoping that we get to actually share our story of how you became an investor and an advisor for many, to use the name of the company, for the many. So thank you for joining me on this episode.
Thank you so much for having me. It feels really good to be here. And it's funny when you were saying the title of the last podcast, Exploring Belonging and Scarcity. Immediately what came up for me was what we were discussing just before we pressed record on this episode. And so you, Christina, were sharing how we were sharing a bed in this epic Airbnb with this incredible view before us, and talking about personal relationship. And in that, you shared what came up for you, a little bit of wondering, oh gosh, should I be sharing this with her? Is this too personal? Is she still going to believe in me? And I laugh because last night for me, all that was moving through my body was this deep joy and relief of, we got here. We transmuted so much. We've really shifted paradigms within this relationship, I think, of what it means to be an investor, receiver, advisor, founder, even just like kind of co-coaches to one another. And something you said was that thought of, will she believe in me? Will she believe in me? And what's fascinating is that I can say wholeheartedly that that assessment brain doesn't live in my body anymore with you. And also what you're feeling is so valid, because for a long time it did, because I was so trained to believe that investing in someone energetically, money just being energy, right? It's an output of energy. Let me make sure I'm doing good. Let me make sure I'm doing right. Let me make sure I'm doing this. And so there was so much weight I was actually putting externally on you to validate me. if this succeeds, I'm good. Right? If this does well, I'm powerful. Right? And yeah, it's fascinating to see through the lens of our relationship how far I feel we've come, how far I feel I've come, and genuinely knowing, and this is a flip I'd like to share as we continue this conversation based on the many conversations we've had around money and scarcity and the vulnerability we've shared, because that was my first time investing in a startup. And I remember my financial advisor being like, show me more. I need to, or show me numbers, or show me this, or I don't know. And I was just like, this is for a good cause and it will help people. And that's what matters. And what's interesting is I understand the game of pluses and minuses. I understand math, right? I understand how numbers work. And also, I really believe that there's something so powerful in the opportunity I gained through this, in believing I'm going to trust this. I'm going to keep trusting this, and I'm going to keep trusting this. And it's scary, and there's so many dynamics that Christina and I are going to traverse, and even getting space. I mean, we got so much space, which I loved that we could speak to. And I feel I also acknowledge, hey, I can't hold this, right? I don't know how to be supportive to you when I'm feeling like I'm in a space of feeling critical of myself, perhaps, for maybe investing so idealistically, or whatever that word is, right? And last night I was sitting in the bed, and even when you just reflected that now, I thought, wow, none of that math makes sense anymore, because I believe so deeply in the goodness of the heart in front of me. I mean, so special. And the alignment that's been brought into my life from the exercises and opportunities here. I mean, I couldn't have paid for that. You know, I would have had to pay for some real big course to overcome my scarcity around money, but instead, right, the bargain price. And I just, last night there was a moment, I think, where I hugged you, or it was this morning. I know it's all blurring together because it's been such a fantastical weekend, and I can't wait to talk more about Lee too. I hugged you, and I just thought, wow, look where we are. Look at this. Look at what love has created for us through our devotion and persistence to continue to believe in the goodness of one another, by also perpetually believing and devoting ourselves to the goodness of ourselves. And it's interesting because I think in relationship, I brought up the belonging and scarcity, because so much of what you were saying of, will she still believe in me? Right? There is the sense of belonging and scarcity in that, right? Almost like relationship. If they see me doing this, if they see me, I don't know, shoving peanut butter in my from the jar in a spoon at 10 p.m., will they still love me? Will they still believe in me as a partner? Will they still believe in me as a CEO or founder? Will they still believe in me as this or that? And I think it's interesting how money, investors, the game, right? It's not like anything else. In relationship, I feel so clear, like, okay, well, if they can't see all of me, then, that's my power to give them consent into what they're signing up for, right? Here, see all of me. If you don't believe in me, that's fine. I'm not for you. That's okay. And also in the constructs of companies, like, how far do we go to keep our investors happy at the expense of presenting ourselves a certain way, only showing or hiding certain things. And I think that's really socially accepted. And also in light of this company itself, WeDeepen, which is all about intimacy and relating. You know, when we went through the Aboutly study, let's say, we saw that our brain nodes are quite opposite in almost every node. And I turned to you and I actually really felt your relief when I said, wow, we're doing such a great job. Like, we are getting to practice how to build bridges to brains that are different from ours every single day through our devotion to this relationship. And you said, oh, I'm so glad you see it that way. And I just felt I was like, oh, this poor girl, she's had to see me be like, do this, do that. This is how we make money. Like, you know. So I'll just start there. And I'd love to hear just what that brings up for you.
Are you okay with me sharing of how much you invested? So this is $50,000 in January of 2020 in a convertible note. And I remember during that period, actually, I had a CFO who was working closely with me. And she actually had wanted me to go back and ask you for more because the round that we were doing, we were in a seed round of 150 to 250,000 as we want to close on. And she's like, go back to Aspen and see if you can get more money. And I remember feeling like, I think this is good. I don't think I did go back and have that conversation. Did I?
So interesting you say this, because now I remember that you guys were generally asking for more. That's actually what did transpire from my conversation with my financial advisor. So I was thinking about giving you 100, 150. And we'll go into the dynamics of the whys and the pulls and the multifacetedness of that. But I love that your intuition said, let's keep this here. Because imagine, it was like we chose exactly the amount we could handle in our relationship.
Yeah. And then during that time period, you said to me at one point, you said, well, if I give you this money, even if I don't get anything back in return, I will know that I've given it to such a great cause. And it was so worthwhile for this experience because, like, in short of like, this is going to bring more love into the world. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, wow, who is this angel? And I use that story. I would tell other people that, and I'd be like, don't tell any other investors that my first investor said this. But it was like such a legendary story. And for me, of like an easing my nervous system of, the first time taking outside investment. And I did learn something. My dad did put in the first round, and my dad invested in August of 2019. And it was within 24 hours of bringing Lisa on board. She was my first hire. I pretty much was, so WeDeepen launched, I say officially, in Los Angeles in January of 2019. By the summer, we were building traction. I was lone wolfing it. I had advisors, mainly guys, and I was going to them. I'm like, I think I just need like 10, 20,000. They're like, Christina, you can't raise 10, 20,000. I'm like, well, the 10, 20,000 will get me the financial support to build out the pro forma, to show, to go out and raise the next round of funding. And one of those guys had introduced me to Lisa, who became my CFO, and in bringing her on board within that first 24 hours, because she was $5,000 a month, I went to my dad, because friends and family, your first round, and told him, hey, Dad, I'm raising 50,000. And my dad said, well, I'll put in 25,000 and your mom put in 25,000. We go, and I was like, Dad, I'm not going to, this isn't like a tip for Dad to go into my, well, I was like, I'll go to other family member. And my dad being so prideful, no, you're not going to other family member. I'll take care of it. And it was more of like his stubbornness. He actually came back to me months later and apologized that he felt that he withheld me from going out and getting more money. And he thought that because I'm his child, that he should do it. However, I did learn a little bit about parenting that moment, because my family watched me. I mean, I slept in second bedrooms, on couches, for years before any of they would definitely help me little by little, but these tiny things, there was never a real hey, we believe in you, we're supporting you. Like they let me struggle for quite some time before. So I did learn a little bit about, I think, parenting in that moment, because it didn't come from, like, my dad saw me work really hard for a long period of time before he gave that money in. And then you coming in, and I'll say it was interesting because I was in that moment of time feeling probably, that like I was working all the time. Like I was in the grind of not obsession, but it was like I was in the office till 2, 3 a.m. I loved it though. But I was definitely nervous and scared. And what am I doing? And maybe that's even in everyday life. I mean, do any of us really know what we're doing every day? We keep making shit up every single day. We might have this roadmap, but the obstacles and the twists and turns and, the nature prevails. And so, yeah, there was then going back to the, will you keep believing in me? There is a little bit of, of this constant wanting to prove that this is worthwhile. And I think that I don't know if that will ever leave my system. And I think that's almost more of like a driving force for growth and evolution. Like I want to keep growing and evolving. And so I want the people around me to experience that and to see that and to not give up. And I see with the external world can be so distracting at times. There's so much out there to do and see and to be and to invest in and where to put your money in. I think there was a period of time during, January of 2019, fast forward, we're now in, spring of 2023, but there was a period of time where crypto was really hot. And it was like, I could have put my money in crypto, and where could I have been? Like there's so many different spaces that investment can go. And there is a wanting to prove ROI, and it could even be correlated to, the first people who invest in you and give you money is your parents. So I want to make my parents proud. I always want to make my parents proud. So I think there's probably a little bit of that, of someone gives you money, you want to make them proud. You want to deliver the product and the service that they're like, yes, like I bought this. I got you. You actually bought something. Like it was like that's what investment is. You're buying into an idea or a product. And so of being the one providing the service of that, you want to keep providing a service that is deemed valuable and almost over deliver the value. Like you didn't even know that if you invest in WeDeepen, you said to me last night, which was beautiful. You're like, people should just invest to hang out with you all the time, because this is so much fun to be a part of this. And you get to go on the Christina ride.
Yeah, so I actually do think that should be part of the business model. So anybody who wants to have an epic experience for 2 weeks, Christina's currently based in Austin. I mean, I think for maybe the bargain price of like $5-10K just to go to events with you at night and meet the incredible people you meet, because I've been with you for the past 48 hours and basically met soulmates for the rest of my life. So just a little hint out there. Yeah, I've no doubt. So the business model is still in the works and subject to change. So, okay, this is where we're at post COVID. And I love what you're saying about what I'm hearing are, one, the imprints of our parents, right? And the imprints of this world, like being worthy, showing that we did something of value. What I really feel from you is a deep allegiance to reciprocity. I think that really drives you in my observations of you. And so I understand, and I have a similar value. And so I understand, rather than this, words can be so nebulous, as we're finding from brain types. I guess I'll just give a clue to the world that I will tend to use more nebulous words like important, good, amazing, peaceful. So what the fuck does that mean? That said, I think I feel you, or maybe I'll just speak to my own experience, which is what I feel in the reflection of you is, if someone invests in me, they believe in me, whatever it is, whether they buy me a coffee, whether they give me a hug when I'm down, whether they sit there and listen in conversation, right? Whatever that is, that energetic exchange, I feel inspired because they've inspired me to be more of myself. And so it's a sense of you've given, and so I can give, right? And I really feel that that's one of your true norths. And I think when you said investors invest for XYZ, I think investors invest and people give for all kinds of reasons. I think it's a really cute package to put things in of like, I'm going to invest in X because it's going to give me more money in 5 years and cute. I think whenever any startups come to me and I'm looking at their pitch decks, and for me, it's actually a red flag if they're so sure about this, what it's going to look like in 2 years and 3 years and 5 years. And I'm like, dude, if you and me aren't able to speak the same secret language of, we're just making this up, right? Like, this is a total guessing game, but can you sell the guessing game? And do the people feel good? And like I always say, I only invest in people who are what they do, because that to me is a solid investment, right? Because I know whether it takes them however long to figure it out, they're not going to stop trying. And if you keep persisting, you will find a way forward, right? And so I get to be really clear on also my capacity to support in terms of the business model or their capacity to pull people in. And something that really you've helped me flip so many times is anytime I'm saying in my own mind or my own insecurity, oh, I'm not sure if I believe in her, I'm actually saying I don't believe in me. Because I am a supportive force to your experience. And I believe that people together can create anything, right? It doesn't mean that we have all the answers, but we have the capacity to have all the answers. And so, or to find support, right? To create, to problem solve. And so to create our own reality. And so when you were saying, I know the way, I just want to show I know the way, it's like so much of what I appreciate actually, which is why the expanding vulnerability in our relationship feels safer to me, is when people are like, I don't know the way, which you do. You say that. But I'm sure as hell going to find it, right? I think some of the best entrepreneurs are wildly aware that they don't know and actually know where to pull in support in those places. And I do think that that theory of I do know can actually protect us or handicap us from receiving the support that we need. And there was a last thing that you said that I wanted to respond to. Just the reasons for investing, to share vulnerably. I've shared this with you of my own, having lost my father very young, and so much of what drove the building of my first company and exiting my first company was, if I'm a founder, if I'm a CEO, if I'm some fancy title, if I've exited for this much, if I live this many blocks from the beach in Santa Monica, right? That was all for this sense of, then I will be loved, then I will be enough, then everyone will believe in me, then. And what's interesting is that even when I exited my first company and, got all this money, I was still proving myself when investing in your company to you. Like, we were a vibrational match, and that you were trying to prove yourself to me and I was trying to prove myself to you, right? Coming in that room, oh yeah, I can invest this much. And that was through the conduit of our friend, Zach, who, I don't know how much I could share there, but everything. Okay. So that both of us shared an intimate experience with sequentially, just to clarify there. This wasn't a Playhouse thing. Okay. And I think I still had lingering feelings because of the pedestaling and projecting that I was doing around Zach of, oh, he's smart and he uses these big words, and, you know, and so I, in part, wanted him to see me as cool, and he brought me to your company, and I genuinely believed in the vision, and I trust the integrity of my own heart that if he brought me to, like, these are hats for dogs, I'd be like, cool, but that's not for me to give my money to, right? But it was really a mission that I clearly needed based on all of the things I was doing and driving my life force towards for the sake of belonging, for the sake of being enough, rather than believing that I am worthy of being loved purely in my existence and uniqueness and beingness, and trusting that I am the source of all possibility around me, rather than anyone's external valuation of me being the source of possibility. Yeah. And that feels good to say, and really feel like I am in the practice of consistently devoting to and embodying. And it is a practice, and you see me in it. And so a lot of the money that I gave was very much from a place of, oh, great, like, I'll be seen as an investor of something cool by people who I want to value me. And there's loads of genuineness in that too. And also it's complex. Like, why people invest is so complex, because ultimately we have been raised in a society of giving to get, or that we are only worthy if we can give something, or we only be accepted if we can give something. And I think that both of us were really playing that out and had the opportunity to heal that with each other through conversation. That's my puppy. I'm sorry.
Oakley's barking over there. This is Aspen's little baby, little angel doggy. You know, when we did, you brought up that last night we shared a bed together, and we had some girl talk before going to sleep. And I said, this morning, I'm like, oh my gosh, I still wonder, should I be sharing this stuff with you? Because we were talking about relationships, and it's interesting to even have that thought, because I have been the person for years that would go to, the conferences, and CEOs would share their stories of how they, built this company. And I would raise my hand and be like, how's your love life? Because that's the thing that's most interesting to me, is like what's happening in the most intimate areas of your life. And there I was sharing that piece with you. And then I had a little bit of a vulnerability hangover this morning to like, oh, did you, share too much in that experience? And as you said, why people invest is also, why do people start a company? And why I started WeDeepen is very much connected to my own personal desires, and probably even, which I didn't correlate it to, but my own healing as well. And to even get a little more vulnerable in that, because it caused us to even go deeper into these conversations around family and where we're at in our life. And I shared with you, I'm dating somebody who does not want to have children. And so it's, well, why are you having that experience? And when I go deep down why I would love to be a mother, what's most important to me is having a healthy, thriving relationship first and foremost. And so being in that learning, and there is some times where I even look at myself and be like, oh my God, like, is maybe my brain set up? Because this is about lead training. I'm like, eventually you guys are all going to learn about it, but I'm going to give you some tidbits. Like, my brain has no node receptor in outcomes. And I'm very much I'm gathering information from the external world. I'm very primed to receive. I'm not necessarily initiating a lot, although it can appear through my work that I'm initiating a lot, but I'm very primed and operating from that space of, even you can see of WeDeepen, it's like this curated ecosystem of things that I've collected from the external world and brought in. And in the working with people individually, because why WeDeepen is this, ecosystem curating all the brands of social and transformational experiences like retreats and festivals and workshops and even like group meditations or experiences like people in states of play and joy and fun, like improv. I work privately. We've coupled that. It's currently been coupled with WeDeepen, but I think we might be uncoupling that, where Christina also separately does relationship coaching and private matchmaking. And there's a little bit of like, who am I? Who am I to support you all in that? I am still in my own process. Well, why I'm really, I think, pretty fucking good at dating, someone from an external would be like, well, she hasn't achieved this. Like, where's she gonna? But so it's that, that I think that's where the vulnerability aspect comes into, of sharing, of me being in the journey. And so I'm, it's the remembrance. We talk about the pedestal, like pedestaling people. It's a remembrance that we're all human. Yeah, we're spiritual beings having we're spiritual beings having a human experience. So at the end of the day, we're all human in the process. And what helps me to is this idea of, this is where I like believing in reincarnation. It's that our souls are coming to make tweaks and corrections. And again, this is a belief. You don't have to believe this. But for me, of believing that the soul's evolutionary journey, and it's not limited to one specific lifetime. And someone could say that's your coping mechanism for whatever process you're in. Yeah, I see you raising your hand over there. I actually don't. I say all this, so I'm curious to hear what you say, and then I'm also curious for you to share a little bit more about your background prior to investing in WeDeepen, because there's a lot of people out there who they want to be investors in companies. That is actually a goal that people have, of they want to support philanthropic initiatives or they want to invest in social impact companies, but it's how do they get to that space to be able to do that?
Okay, so I'm going to answer that latter question. That definitely was not my intention at the beginning of all of this. I'll tell you what. So I can tell you what my path was, and it was not with that intention to be an investor. So I don't know that my sharing will apply to that specific audience. But first, I wanted to say, just so fascinating how our brains can assess and evaluate from a place of wanting to, am I safe? Right? We've evolved to detect we're all here because our ancestors figured that shit out, right? Our ancestors didn't get eaten by a jaguar, we're here. So, what I see in the morning review of what you shared last night is is that too much? Was that, and also I'm connecting the dots based on what you just said. This may or may not be what your intention was to share, but what my brain did there, which I love, just the extra permission we have to use this language through Aboutly. What my brain did there was, there's a judgment coupled with the, am I oversharing, from a place of, will she believe in me to do this because this is all about our relationships and have I achieved that, right? And I think that in my experience of people who are devoted to some path of medicine or healing, and whose dharma, let's say, again, if you believe in that, is to support others in that path, are often given many mountains, right? Like if I want to teach people to climb, all kinds of people, how to climb, and I've climbed Mount Everest and I just did it really well and awesome. Great, then I'm I'm for that target market that has only climbed Mount Everest. Awesome. If I've been given Mount Everest and I don't know the names of the other mountains, and then Mount Monkey, and then Mount, Juju, now I can speak to people who have or want to, desire to, or find themselves on each of those mountains. And so I know for myself, there's a story that I can tell around my own timeline and relationship. And I've been in some beautiful relationships, and also I've experienced, I think empirically, what like someone like Gabor Mate would say, this is a point. This counts as a point for trauma. And I score very high in how much trauma I've had in my youth. And I can look at that as, interesting. This is, I'm not somewhere on some timeline, or who am I to, but I am exactly the who too. Because I have been given all of this. So you are exactly the who too, because your curiosity has led you to all these places of wanting to discover the intricacies of intimacy. You don't approach relationship. I don't see you approaching a relationship really from a place of, cool, I do want this outcome, right? Obviously your brain, we know, is not oriented that way, but you're not like, cool, I want this outcome and I want this thing. I see you as an explorer and discoverer of intimacy and constantly in that learning. And that to me seems like one of your highest priorities. And so you are devoting to the study of relationship through the experience of yourself. And that requires a type of compassion and aptitude, willingness, openness, patience to witness yourself and other. I mean, I think anybody can attest to this who knows you. You're one of the least judgmental people I've ever met. And I don't even think you have to try it. Like sometimes I project things, oh, you were feeling this. And you're like, oh no, I just thought that was cute. And I'm just like, holy shit. Like I really feel you as not having a judgmental bone in your body, And so there is much more exploration allowed through your lens, I think, rather than you moving away from people. So you have a database of research that's much wider, I feel, than the average bear in terms of relating. And so you've actually devoted to relating, and you have a wide array and database to offer all kinds of mountain climbers. And I really see that in you. And if I project or impose this is what it should look like, and this is what it should be, and this is what success looks like onto you, well then I'm saying that your joy comes the same way my joy does. And we all do that to ourselves all of the time. And it's fascinating because I actually don't really see you do that to others. I haven't experienced that from you. I always experience a question from you. And yet we often find a way to apply those formulas to ourselves. So yeah, I just want to say that. And maybe selfishly, because as human to human, as a mind and heart I respect, I want to be able to investigate this with you. I vulnerably, selfishly, you're my friend. I want to be able to deepen with you in ways that are supportive to both of us, because I not only respect the integrity of your heart, but I respect, or I appreciate how different we are in our approach, because it allows me, this is something I was saying to somebody earlier about Lee, and I think it applies here. This is very much why we evolve one another so much. And why I think about Lee and empowering different brain types to cooperate more effectively is so wonderful, because if I see in red, blue, and yellow, and you see in white, purple, green, and we can come together, I suddenly have more colors to see the world with. Wow, what a blessing, right? And I think we could all use more colors to see the world with in relationship, which Aboutly is a really powerful tool to do so. And also your exploration of relationship, you've allowed and empowered yourself to see with so many different colors through your constant questioning and curiosity. And so you're giving people more colors to see one another with, which is the crux of building bridges to one another. And that is required. No matter how much we think we get along with somebody, over time, we all change and evolve, and we need to be willing to construct different bridges. And so, I just want to, share shit with me because I find it fascinating, and especially the one you're in right now. And I just find it fascinating, and also because I think we both feel clearly that I am manifesting my partner here soon, and it's going to be a joy to share it with you. To answer your second question, to entrepreneurs or people who desire to eventually be investors, I will share openly that I didn't even know that world really existed. Before you're an entrepreneur, it's like this underground club that once you're in it, you're like, oh crap, this exists. Oh my God, there's just people like doing this startup thing. I think now, gosh, it's almost 8 years ago now, that I was at the beginning. But now it's like startup, Silicon Valley, but it wasn't like that when I started, And so, really, I shared this with you. I shared it on that former podcast, but I was pre-professional, which is pre-med and philosophy at Notre Dame. And I thought in taking those courses, I never had to take a single course in finance. And so I genuinely graduated into the world believing that systems were set up, and I think also in not having a father around, systems were set up to create what I defined as value. And I did not define value as pluses, minuses, dollars, bills. I defined it as service, as thriving life, as supporting one another, as healing, let's say. And so then I did a postgrad program in healthcare management and leadership, took courses like financial management of healthcare organizations, realized that healthcare is just a business model of pluses and minuses and is not actually incentivized towards health at all. And my world sort of crumbled, and I was working at Cedars-Sinai at the time, and I was wildly confused. And I took every last dime I had and went couch surfing through Europe, obviously insert longer story there. Came back and I thought, well, maybe art is a way I can find to escape the game of pluses and minuses. And so I thought maybe film, like people who tell good stories and conspire good in the world, and I can become a director, and it won't be about money, and all the people who work in film are probably just about art. And I got into film, and I think because of my own unawareness of how inculcated the scarcity mindset was in me from having a mom who was an immigrant and having very little growing up, there was still that drive, which was how I became pre-med and philosophy under the guise of I'll be a doctor or lawyer, become successful and stable in the film industry, right? So I went from one independent film set to immediately these huge union jobs. And then I broke down the ladder. I understood how to climb the ladder, and I found myself climbing the ladder, and everything on a film set is money. Every person, every piece of equipment. I ended up in a position called an AD in New York, which you are coordinating maybe a dozen different departments, hundreds of different people, and every set, every camera angle, money. Every moment to create a vision needs to be measured, planned, orchestrated. And there's a budget that you're aligning to. And so, that really crunched my reality. And so I looked around, and I was on a film set that had a wild amount of money and just kept throwing money at things. And we were working maybe 16, 18-hour days. And it's one of those film sets that you hear about where people get hurt, right? Because there's just so much money. For those who are familiar with the film industry, we hit golden hour on background. I think it was 25 times, which means they went over 18 hours. And I realized, or I asked myself, what is the ladder I'm climbing? It's like I was just so intent on it, and I was so intent on regaining stability for myself, stability equated with money, position, title, status, security. And my brain had been so constructed in that reality through the conditioning of school, education, college, straight A's, be a good athlete, right? That I didn't realize I was climbing a ladder I didn't even believe in until years into the film industry. And there are producers that make 10, 20K every paycheck, like every week, every 2 weeks, every month, right? And so I think I knew in my heart that if I kept climbing, I actually wouldn't be able to walk away from that amount of money. It would be really difficult for me to. And I saw a lot of inefficiency on the film set, a lot of paper. I always tell people that my true north is save trees and help the people I love. So people would spend hours organizing paper on film sets, and it is a wildly fragmented industry. And that comes back to one of my core beliefs that if people don't believe in their capacity to change a system, they won't even try. And because the film industry is so fragmented, there's huge studios, and then there's payroll companies, and then there's crew members who are working 16-hour days, hustling, moving from one production to the next. It's just not their role. It's not their responsibility. They have so much to do all day to fix the overarching system that is governing their career, their reality. And my brain saw a few things that were wildly inefficient, and paperwork. So digital onboarding paperwork, every crew member fills out like 30 to 100 pages every time they're hired, which is a wild concept now, years later, when you're thinking about hiring 3,000 people a day for something like Spider-Man, right? And then that paperwork's being collected, and there are all these roles. I mean, it's amazing, the roles and segmented responsibilities that they've created. It's like an efficient machine executed through humans, which is incredible and requires all kinds of communication. And also, can you imagine collecting, 400 sets of paperwork across 20 blocks in New York City? Wildly inefficient. And so what we built was a digital onboarding solution for the film industry. Kickstarter campaign. I gathered people I felt like could help me. Our whole mantra was for the crew, by the crew, which it genuinely was that. It was, people always say, how'd you come up with this idea? I'm like, I didn't. We all needed it. Me and my buddy just had the balls to, or I want to say the yoni, or the pussy, not the balls. We had the pussy too.
How much did you do in a Kickstarter?
Only 25,000. And then we funded more for our developers. It was me, a buddy, and a developer. And we were acquired a year and a half later by one of the largest payroll companies in the film industry. And for, multiple seven-figure. And I was motivated through believing that, okay, film, I didn't find out how to break money in art. Okay, maybe if I start a business, I can find a way to function where there aren't all these authoritarian structures, and I can create something different. And I recall sitting across from, two of the biggest payroll companies, CEOs, and being like, hey, if we do this together, we could do more. If we could do this together, our profit margins even, the crew members would have one login, we'd be able to evolve quicker together. And they were like, yeah. And then the next day, that specific payroll company spoke with Amazon, which were some of our first shows. And because they had so much clout, really talked them out of, and I had mentioned the shows because I said, let's share them. I was just naive. I didn't understand the game. I didn't understand how people could go against what would help more people and actually create more money for the sake of, which is also can be very similar to why people invest, because for the sake of their shareholders saying, we made this money, the others didn't, right? So just throwing that out there is something for investors to also be wary of, because there is so much happening. All of society to me is just a wider parallel of just wounded children trying to be loved by their parents, right? Trying to be enough in some way. And so, no, if we keep all this in our bucket over here, then they won't get to it, and then we'll have more. Well, all I can say is that, we became the leading software for one of those companies that was like, oh, you're never going to make it past the Kickstarter campaign. Why don't you come work over here? We'll pay you a big salary. And I was like, no, I have a commitment. And I was shook. I was shook by these people. And still, I just kept believing in it. But I didn't believe in it because of the money. I didn't believe in it because of the product. I believed in it because I knew these crew members. I believed in it because I trusted myself to honor the needs of the people who would be using the software more than the people who had the money to build or impose, or the power to impose a different system. And so I genuinely believed that if you build something with people, I don't even want to say for people, but with them, and allow them to be part of the creative process. It's much like what I'm saying. I allowed and empowered myself to see more than in red, orange, blue, because I was incorporating all the voices. I would sit with best boys. I would sit, for people who don't know the roles, I would sit with all the roles on a film set. How do we do this? How do we do that? What do you think? What do you like? And this is now formulatized startup 101 feedback models, but I sent out a survey. I didn't send out a survey because I knew that was a formula. I had no idea what the F I was doing, which I think it's so funny when people are like, do you know what you're doing? Like, I love that I'm now an investor that has been through it, that like knows how much I had no idea what the fuck I was doing, right? And so honestly, it was because me and my business partner couldn't agree on where to start. And I needed to, it's a relationship, honor the relationship with him. So I said, okay, let's send out a survey to thousands of our fellow crew members. And that was the best thing we could have done, because ultimately what we were saying is, we are going to listen to you and we are going to build it with you every step of the way. And so then we had a force of hundreds and hundreds of people moving with us behind us. Now, after we were acquired, and part of why we were acquired by a wonderful payroll company, wonderful CEO at the time, I'll say it was Media Services. Barry Oberman changed my life. Wonderful human, believed it so deep, like really changed the trajectory of my life, and also showed me leadership in a way I hadn't seen it before or imagined it in a payroll culture or a business culture. And I'll explain why in a moment. But we were acquired, and I thought, okay, great, like now we can do it differently. Now we have the money. And the reason I wanted to sell was because I didn't want to worry about the money. I just wanted to care about the integrity of the product. And meanwhile, because I believed in it so much, Barry would always send me into these rooms. I remember walking into ABC. An hour later, we had ABC and Disney. It was so easy to close. And I wouldn't even use the term close, because I was just like, this is good for you. I'm giving you something that I see as valuable, and they could sense that I wasn't selling it to them. I was just saying, here's value. Why wouldn't you choose that path, right? Now, with this payroll company, same thing. Businesses are structured to keep the money in their own bucket. And so there are limitations on what you can prioritize. And there was a point where, now it's years later, so everybody's doing things digital, so I don't feel bad calling this out. But, we had a contract with HBO. We had closed with HBO to be their digital onboarding software across all of their projects. And I found out sometime before that meeting with ABC that HBO was doing everything digitally and then printing almost 50% of the start work packets. So printing 30 to 50 pages anyway on the other side, because they had auditors come in who weren't willing to look at it digitally yet. And the only way I could justify what I was doing was believing that I was really also Mother Earth, like being here for Mother Earth. Some thread of that always needs to be in the formula of anything I'm a part of. And that's humans too. We are nature, right? And so when I heard that, I just felt like I was selling something on the values that I thought were happening, but weren't true. And so what the hell, like, it was easier, sure, but it was still wasteful. And so I walked into that ABC meeting, I said all the things, you know, and I believed in it. And also, and everybody was so excited. Whoa, you just closed, you know. And I remember a friend saying to me, I had lunch with him later that day, and he was like, oh, how's your day? Good, blah, blah, blah. Oh, what else? Oh, close this. What? You just closed an entire studio? Like, oh, yeah, I guess so. And I just wasn't, it didn't even matter anymore because for me, it was never about the money or a bonus or a something. So that's why I say to you, I'm not sure that I'm the best person to go to for advice, right? And I say, and I want to call this out in this, the CEO, you know, at some point he noticed, and I had a contract with that company that acquired us. And at some point, you know, at that time I was going by the name Veronica, and he said to me, I can feel you, you know, and I want you to know that if you want to take a sabbatical and, you know, and go to Peru and do your weird, he didn't know how to say it, ayahuasca, you know, like, you can do that and your job is safe here. If you want to work remotely, you can do that and your job is safe here. Mind you, this person, he sensed it intuitively. He offered me a Tesla. He was offering me the moon. I had like a spaceship office, a standing desk. He'd bring in new toys. He brought me an infuser because he like decided I was a hippie. He let me hang all these weird plants in my office, you know, a bike rack. He gave me all the toys. He'd drive me around in his Porsche. Which is, you know, I have a story about a Porsche recently, but anyway, so just, you know, why we want to be an investor, you know, is it for the Porsche? Like, it's just so easy to get clouded in what we really desire for ourselves and what's running us. And he said to me, I want you to know that Tim, that was the name of my company, and it stood for Time is Money, because that was my summary of what I learned in the film industry. And I felt like I could sell that to producers, but the name Tim would be friendly to a crew member. Because mind you, there were, you know, 60-year-old, you know, grips, Teamsters who were making somewhere between 150, 200,000 K a year comfortably for the past 20 years and never even had to have an email address. And now I had to go up to them and say, hey, this is going to change your entire reality. And also you need an email, and oh, you don't have one, and it's not intimidating, I swear. And so there was selling, or rather I'd like to say inspiring, on so many different tiers. And there was a tangent that I went to there with those guys. Anyway, I'll come back to the Barry thing, but I remember him saying to me like, oh, Tim doesn't matter. Oh, Tim. I wanted to be friendly for those guys, right? It's your buddy, Tim. I don't know how much they cared, but I thought it was cute. And so Barry says to me, you know, Tim doesn't matter. This payroll company doesn't matter. What matters is Veronica being happy in the world. If you want out of your contract, if you want to take space, if you want to work different, like whatever you want, your job is safe, but your happiness matters. Whoa, what a gift. And look who I chose in my reality to sell to. I didn't sell to those other payroll companies. And that let me choose something differently. And nobody would have left that job. I mean, I can't speak for the world as much as I like to project my reality onto everybody all the time. Yeah, and that's how I ended up here, and then advising for startups, and really just genuinely wanting to help people from a place of, and I've shared this with you, feeling so alone in my experience, feeling like I couldn't call my parents and say, I'm stressed, or even tell my boyfriend I'm scared, or tell my business partner either. I remember my business partner calling me freaking out all the time, and let me not put that out there. There was a particular moment that I remember where my business partner came to me for support after we lost those 3 Amazon shows. And I had to be what I felt was strong and present and even keeled for him. And then I couldn't vent to my boyfriend about it or my parents. And I was terrified. I remember my boyfriend taking me out to dinner, and I wanted to share something with him. And he said, I'm just really hungry. Can we just eat? I said, okay. And I went to the bathroom and I looked in the mirror and I was about to start crying so hard. And then I looked at myself and I said, this is, we have each other. Me and you in the mirror. What are we crying for? And feeling and crying is so good. But in that moment, I was just like, okay, I have me. And in that moment, I also realized I was going to break up with that person. So it all goes back to relationship.
Wow. Fascinating. Your breadth of knowledge. And it's funny, you said it at one point that I noted. So I don't know if you want to come to me for advice, but I'm like, this is the perfect person to go to for advice because it's so deep and it's much bigger than the exchange of these numbers written on a piece of check. There's more, there's value in experience. There's value in having a mission that is bigger than yourself and serving many more people and part of the evolutionary process of our existence. Now you're here in Austin for a month and we're getting to be together. And, there's this excitement to go into whiteboard with you and to, drill down. And I remember I think it was 2 weeks ago before you left on a phone call, it might have been last week, where you had said, I think I got it. I get what you're doing. Because there was a process and it all, when she says, I get what you're doing, it's back to the initial idea. It really is of what I set out to do in the first place. But during, COVID and survival and we got to make it. And, I need to build a piece of technology to actually make this thing work that I have envisioned, because the weaving together of pre-existing technology to prove the prototype of this is what it is. And the rewind you back to this is ClassPass for social and transformational experiences that help people to have more meaningful, loving relationships. And I think it happens that there was also 2 weeks ago, on that conversation where we went into it and I was feeling so overwhelmed because I was like, oh my gosh, there's just so much going on and there's so many opportunities and I don't want to refuse any of them. But, I'm hiring this new assistant and I've got to train them and there's X, Y, and Z. And yeah, I'm lone wolfing and I feel like I have all this stuff in my head to do. And I was resistant to even having that call with you because there was she's going to think I'm nuts. I don't even know what to tell her. I can't even get to that focus on here's the initial idea because I've got all this other scattered stuff everywhere else. And so I'm not ready for this conversation. I think I was feeling I'm not ready for Aspen. Can she just sit over there? Can I avoid these phone calls for a couple of weeks so I can prepare and get more ready to take this advisement from her so I don't waste her time in this moment, so I don't confuse her, so I don't lose her interest in me because she's this girl's all over the place right now. And but it was going through that moment that actually catapulted into the realization of actually, here's where it is distilled down. I'm doing all this other stuff. All this other stuff is in support of that other thing of building this. Just got to build the tech product because the thing that's driving me actually crazy is because I'm manipulating pre-existing technology and making it all try to work on something that wasn't built for what I actually needed. And in regards to proof of concept, I proved it. And during that call, you're like, let's send out a survey. And I'm like, oh, who's going to send out the survey? And that's another thing you're adding to my list. And oh my gosh. But by the end of the call, I'm like, let's send out a survey. You're right. That's a great idea. It'll help enroll everything. But that's the relational exercises of being so real with each other that we actually get to deepen into what exactly it is that wants to happen next and happen next and happen next. So I'm super excited that we now get this month together and the, even too, if I rewind back like 3 months ago in a particular advisor, and I was like, I'm going to put together the plan to build this class because I can't stop like this. It's to have one central location to go to discover all of the experiences that have been vetted and approved. And there's a reputation system wrapped around it. And the reputation system is so important because in the quote unquote love industry, or the human connection industry where people are finding belonging, is one of the most easiest places to manipulate humans. So to have a reputation system wrapped around it, not only does it serve as some type of like protectant mechanism. I actually, when anyone says the word safety, I kind of repel a little bit from safety because I'm like, what are you talking about in safety? What does that even mean? I don't know what that means to you. What does that mean to me? But to have a, there's Oakley is back here with us. To wrap that reputation system around it, not only does it provide this level of protection, it also evolves the experiences. I don't necessarily want to call it a competition, but my brain node aboutly does have some power into it. So I'm always seeking of how I can even do better than before and reach the next level of standards. And if there's nothing to, take the good, leave the bad, but even in like the film industry has, the Oscars. There's like an awards mechanism. This industry itself, the quote unquote human connection, the field of human connection, or the relationship field, is sort of unrecognized. What brands do you know that are supportive of this? I could name a lot because I've made it my business, but, Respectful Conversation, Honesty Labs, The Art of Nonviolent Communication, Authentic Relating, Unleash, Ecstatic Dance, 5 Rhythms, Dance Alive, Tony Robbins, Joe Dispenza, Aboutly. We can throw Aboutly in here too. The Magic of Human Connection, Dating Dojo, Biohacking Conference, like all these experiences or spaces that people come together do require a union for them. And I explained that to one of Yadi Iksa, who's the founder of Unleash. I keep looping her into joining the WeDeepen ecosystem. And there's a little bit of like her confusion around it. Well, I want my own sovereignty. And I'm like, dude, you're joining a union. We rise together. Inside of us, we have one, if we unionize, and that's what I see of WeDeepen, is creating the union, and we're supporting the technology to then reach more people, show them, it's also too, if you think of press. If you go to the press and you're like, hey, there's this one great new, I'm making this up, one great new brand of Indian restaurant. They're like, that's one. Well, now we have 2. But if you go to them with like, here's more, here's this whole island of lots more, then they're like, oh, there's an island? Yeah, there's an island that's supportive of people. Well, show us the island. And that's what WeDeepen is aiming to do. We want to show you the island, show you this field of all these experiences. And it's interesting because I find myself last night before we go to bed, and a little bit of Benji, who's the founder of Aboutly, he has this, for him to wind down at the end of the night is he watches TV and plays video games on his phone, or plays a brain game on his phone. Most people could judge out there. You shouldn't watch TV or take in blue light before you go to bed. But that's how he calms down and winds himself. For me, when I lay in my bed some nights, I've learned through not to judge myself through his experience. I scroll through Facebook and I go to the Esther Perel discussion group, Healing from Infidelity, the Chump Nation, which is around people who have bonding over infidelity, another infidelity group of cheating. And they're all, in this supportive environment, haven't never met in person, but they're sharing their challenges. Sometimes they're sharing their wins and they're giving advice and, making other people not feel so alone, sometimes celebrating with each other when they overcome hurdles. But they're not getting together in person. They're not necessarily, sometimes they're stuck in the heartache. And yeah, there might be some relief by sharing with strangers online of your experiences, but I read these stories so much, the vastness of the challenge that people are experiencing in disconnection and lack of understanding around relationships. And so to unite the facilitators of these experiences and the people who are interested in journeying through and evolving in their relational life to discover more about who they are authentically so they can share that authentic self with somebody else in a relationship. And that is really what excites me most. And one of the things, I don't know why this is coming through to share with me, but in my whole entire process, what I see sometimes the most challenging, specifically in my private practice, is people have these experiences that they're navigating in their head of like how they process a relational experience. And in my private practice, and I get to hear that experience, and then I get to essentially act it out back to them, like what they want to say to the other person, and reflect that to them. It's kind of, I guess, a little bit of mirroring and reflection, but a little bit of like, acting out. They talk about this, I think is somewhat similar maybe in family constellation or circling. And it's edgy for me because I get to, I'm like, I hope I don't fuck this up as I start. And I just act as themselves and what they're aiming to say, what they've just shared with me, and how they communicate to the other person. And I watch their eyes light up and be like, wow. So in these experiences of when we come together collectively, epiphanies happen. We see the world differently. We accept people in their own uniqueness. Things that maybe have seemed weird, like in sexuality around kinks or what people are navigating separately, like we share those stories that they don't seem so foreign anymore and weird. And we also inject joy into it because a lot of the experiences are fun and they're exciting and they're freeing and they involve movement and dance and laughs and also an activation of greater leadership in now our political world. And there's pleasure involved in that. So I'm grateful that you're here, and I'm grateful to have you as a partner and to be working this. And there, there is something that's incomprehensible that is godly, like to have brought together in this experience. And I'm feeling really grateful to have you here.
Yeah, me too. And as you're saying that, the sun is setting and shining over this miraculous hillside view that we have. And, I think it's fascinating to be having this conversation with you in the context of this Aboutly mastermind, and knowing that your brain type really is one of a translator, and how when you say you're leaning into this edge of translating for people, it's like you're leaning into one of your most natural alignments. And yeah, and now that we have this knowledge, I'd like to share a bit of, when I say knowledge, I mean this Aboutly download. Christina just expressed WeDeepen and what it is in what we would say a structure concept way. And that's her brain. And so I'm going to express it to close here in a concept use brain, so that we can reach more audiences. And so you'll notice that she went through some of the details and specifics and examples and how it's all structured and how it will have impact and how that structure will impact other structures. And so my concept use brain wants to paraphrase and say similar and different. WeDeepen is the class pass of conscious relating, right? And I see that, like, period, how necessary that is. The way we saw mental health take a dive during COVID, the way the studies we see, and if you're listening to this podcast, you already know this, I'm going to say it anyway, because I love rehearing it for myself, that one of the greatest predicators of health, it's not working out, it's not diet, it's the quality of your relationship. Ischemic heart disease, blood pressure, obesity, the list goes on, and it always comes back to the quality of your relationships. And we evolve necessarily, we know ourselves as self through the reflection of another. This is evolution. And so when you say to me this union concept, or this connective tissue between events that are, or even just gatherings of people who are inspired to learn new relationship technology, it empowers us all to evolve together and use a similar language, right? So it's like we're all exchanging building blocks through our shared desire. And so we become the researchers and the devotees to the evolution of human relationship through our desire and our true north being one that honors that as a priority in our experience here as human. And that's really why I think the unionizing, let's say, is so powerful. And I know for myself, selfishly, I show up here in Austin. You know, I'm coming here from Bend, Oregon. I grew up in New York. I lived in LA. I've lived all over. And to be able to land somewhere and know that I can go someplace where there are either people speaking the same language, people who have even more tools or language creation that will allow me to experience myself with more permission or more colors, or people who maybe don't have that language yet but have a willingness to. Whew. What an exhale to know that there's a place that I can go, that the world is evolving as such that I can find that type of community that shares similar values, that prioritizes evolution and connection above maybe all else. And I feel confident saying that that is one of my highest priorities in this lifetime. And there is so much marketing around bars, food, drinking, even at parks, some of the social structures, can be, I think about hiking with my dog on the trails, and it's beautiful. And I love being in Bend, Oregon, and being out in nature and saying hi. And there's this beautiful relating. And yet there are so many social constructs around it of like, how deep can we go? What questions can I ask? Is it going to be the cliche, what do you do for work? What's this? What's that? Right? How do we learn about the truth of our own humanhood without being exposed to that of another? Like, I'll say it in a really simple way. I have no idea why this just flashed. This is going to be gross. Okay. I just want to, this is going to be gross. Okay. So I dated somebody and we were living in a 400 square foot apartment in Lower East Side, New York. The only door was the bathroom, right? So you can imagine when we had, disagreements, I would sit in the bathtub, and at the time I was, I would drink wine, and I would sit in the bathtub and drink a glass of wine and cry, And because we were in such close proximity, we'd have conversations about everything. And he shared once, oh yeah, I just sit and I poop and I read, and I'm like, that sounds really relaxing. And I'm like, I kind of have to push. Like I have to it's like I have to be intentional and I have to push, and it's like it's not like it's something I want to just sit and do for an hour. He's like, no, I just wait and it just comes. And so unless I am someone who is studying the field of colons and intestines, I would never know this without having the permission to share with somebody. Oh wow, we poop differently. Oh, wow, I could actually have the experience. Let me try that a different way. Let me see how that feels. Even the bedtime rituals, right? We don't know what will work for us and what won't without something beyond what the external culture is willing to talk to and speak to. And so this is a place of discovery of self through the permission to talk about all things relationship. And that to me is a wild gift of being able to connect with people who want to connect, because it takes bravery. It takes vulnerability, courage. It takes a willingness to say all these things that happened in my life. Well, I'm going to meet myself there in the truth of it. And I know that that's a practice for me, because for a long time I was like, why am I scared in this moment? I don't want to say it, which is me saying, I'm ashamed of the truth of what happened to me that now makes my inner child scared in this moment, right? And so instead I speak to, I'm feeling a little nervous right now. It has nothing to do with you. It's mine. I know why. I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to breathe, right? I'm going to tap myself if I had to. I bought a car recently. I was tapping myself in this. I was like, oh my God, I'm signing up for the game. Like, this is so weird to finance something. Like, I've always just bought things outright. But I was like, okay, financing this seems like a good adult thing to do, you know? Like, and I'm tapping in the office. I'm like, oh my God, I'm attached to the system, you know? And I felt so weird. I felt so weird, but that's what I needed. And if there was somebody else with me saying, oh, are you tapping? Oh, yeah, that feels good on my body too, you know, like, but I just have to be willing to be weird. And I want to be around people who are willing to be quote unquote weird, which to me is the new fucking cool, right? And that's what WeDeepen is. WeDeepen is for the new fucking cool. And thank you. Thank you for your devotion and bravery through the waves of committing to something that you see as a need for this world and as you see as a need for yourself. It is brave to be in service. I love you.
I love you too. Oh. On that note, we're going to wrap. Thank you all for listening to another episode of Deepen with Christina. I'm closing out. I'm wondering, is this the real close? Is there anything else? I think this feels good. This feels good. There's in a future episode, I would love, there was a moment that you and I had together in December of this past year where we had moved through another mountain and you had shared your childhood story. And this is part 1, and I would love to get that part 2. Definitely go check out that calendar at WeDeepen.com and come join us, because why I love recording this podcast. Both Aspen and I are real life beings out in the world, and what we enjoy most is meeting you in person and being together, especially at events like an Aboutly training or a dating dojo, something fun that is bonding and we get to grow together. If you do enjoy this podcast, please do give it 5 stars, rate it on whatever podcast app you're listening to. Again, it helps more people find it, helps me continue to produce it, and also brings more people into the weave, into the network. Until next time, enjoy. Love you all.